1 year after his final professional match, Rafael Nadal walked back onto a tennis court. He didn't come back for a tournament. He didn't come back for himself. He came back to make a statement. And every person in tennis understood exactly what that statement meant. But to understand why that moment carried so much weight, you have to go back to a rivalry that defined an entire generation of the sport, and back to the two stories that were quietly building in its shadow for years. Now, for more than 2 decades, Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal split the tennis world in half, not just as competitors, but as two completely different ideas about what tennis could be. Federer was the Swiss master, elegant, precise, a player who made the game look like it required no effort at all. Nadal was the Spaniard from Mallorca, relentless, physical, a player who turned suffering into a weapon. They met 40 times. Nadal led the head-to-head 24 wins to 16. But those numbers never told the full story. What existed between these two men was a mutual respect that goes beyond sport, the kind that only the truly great ever get to understand. And when both of them retired, Federer in 2022 and Nadal in 2024, the tennis world was left facing the question that always follows when legends walk away. Who comes next? Federer had already found his answer in Filipina, an 18-year-old Brazilian competing for On Running, the sportswear company Federer co-owns. Now, this wasn't just a sponsorship. Federer believed in Fana personally, promoted him publicly, and positioned him as the face of a future he was carefully constructing from the sidelines. Fana had earned that confidence. He won the US Open Junior title in 2023 and reached the second round of the 2025 Australian Open after defeating Andrei Rublev. Federer's chosen successor was clear to everyone watching. Nadal's answer, however, it had been years in the making, and it started when a 13-year-old girl from Quezon City first arrived at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca. Her name was Alexandra Eala, a left-handed Filipina with a competitive intensity that Nadal recognized from the very beginning. He watched her develop season by season. He acknowledged her progress the way a genuine mentor does, quietly, consistently, without fanfare. He tracked her ranking. He understood what she was becoming long before the rest of the world did. 2 legends, 2 successors, 2 parallel stories. And for a while, it seemed like the sport had enough room for both of them. But parallel lines don't stay parallel forever, and 2025 was the year everything changed. To understand how the tension eventually broke into the Open, you first have to understand what Alex Eala actually did that season, because this was not a gradual rise through the rankings. In a single calendar year, she became the first Filipina in history to win a WTA singles title, break into the top 100 in the world, and reach the semifinals of a WTA 1000 event. By the end of 2025, her career-high ranking stood at number 50 in the world. But even those numbers don't fully capture what happened, because the numbers can't show you the crowds. March 2025, Miami Open. Eala arrived as a qualifier, meaning she had fought through the pre-tournament rounds just to earn her place in the main draw. She then defeated the reigning Australian Open champion. She beat a former world number 1. She moved past Madison Keys. She fell to Jessica Pegula in the semi-finals, and even that loss felt like something the stadium wasn't prepared to absorb. The Filipino community in Miami transformed that arena into something different. More than thousands of miles away across 7 islands, in living rooms and cafes, and on phones in places that had never followed a tennis match before, an entire country was watching. Then came the US Open. And if Miami was the moment people started paying attention, the US Open was the moment they couldn't look away. Third set, Eala down 1-5. Most players at that scoreline are already mentally composing their post-match interview. Eala kept competing. She fought her way back to 4-5. And then came a moment that stopped the match completely. She flicked a ball toward the net, and the immediate question was whether her racket had crossed the tape. Chair umpire Kader Nooney reviewed the footage. The stadium went quiet. He ruled in Eala's favor. Her opponent Clara Tosan contested the call. The crowd split. The noise was extraordinary. And through all of it, a 20-year-old from the Philippines won her first Grand Slam main draw match and fell to the court in shock. When a tennis referee from Dubai, someone who had worked matches involving Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, and Agassi, said plainly that Eala's matches felt like a different experience. Not louder necessarily, but distinct, more charged, more alive. Ticket sales for the 2026 Dubai Tennis Championships rose 48% year over year, and her attendance was the primary reason cited. Meanwhile, Fauna was doing exactly what a successor is supposed to do, working consistently, developing his game, on taking the right steps at the right time. But the spotlight, that relentless, oversized spotlight, followed Eala everywhere she went. And in the private conversations happening in the corridors of professional tennis, a tension was forming that hadn't yet found a public voice. Then came the interview that changed everything. Late 2025, a promotional event tied to Federer's upcoming Hall of Fame induction in 2026. A journalist sat him down for what began as a warm, nostalgic conversation. But when the discussion turned to the next generation, Federer smiled at the mention of Fauna's name. Then Eala's name came up. What followed was not a shout or an outburst. It was something more deliberate than that. A carefully worded suggestion that players like Fauna were being overlooked because one player had captured what Federer described, in his exact words, as a phenomenon of nationalism rather than tennis merit. The internet did not wait for context. It never does. Those 6 words were clipped, shared, and responded to roughly 10 million times across platforms within hours. Filipino tennis fans, already one of the most organized and passionate fan bases in the sport, responded immediately. Comment sections became unrecognizable. A name that had carried nearly universal respect for 20 years was suddenly appearing in conversations for entirely different reasons. The same question kept surfacing everywhere. Would anyone in the tennis world actually speak up? Would anyone stand beside her? November 19th, 2025. Exactly 1 year after his final professional match at the Davis Cup Finals, Rafael Nadal picked up a tennis racket for the first time since retirement. His first practice partner was Alexandra Eala, WTA world number 50. The session took place at the Rafa Nadal Academy. He posted a photo with a caption that read, "1 year later, it felt great to be back on a tennis court. Practicing with you, Alex Eala, was fantastic. I'll be more resilient the next time." She replied simply, "Back like you never left." Given everything that was surrounding her name at that precise moment, those 4 words carried a weight that went far beyond the court. Because Nadal and Eala didn't just hit tennis balls that day. In a world where powerful men routinely choose neutrality to protect their own legacies, Nadal chose a side. Openly, clearly, without any ambiguity. The girl he had watched grow up inside his academy, the one who had taken every lesson he taught about fighting spirit and carried it to courts across the world, that was who he stood beside. When asked directly about Federer's remarks in a follow-up interview, Nadal responded with the same measured precision he brings to everything. He said any athlete who attracts new fans to the sport should be celebrated, not treated with suspicion. He said a supporter's passion is not a liability to tennis. It is its lifeline. He acknowledged that he had spent years watching Eala work and that the size of a fan base should never be confused with an absence of merit. Then he added carefully, "My friendship with Roger is excellent." He kept the relationship intact, but on the substance of this specific matter, he was not going to stay silent. Not when it involved someone he had openly believed in and mentored since before the wider world knew her name. Now, this story also demands a more honest question. Was Federer entirely wrong? Fauna is a genuine talent, technically refined, athletically gifted, mentally mature for his age. And it is fair to say that Eala's cultural phenomenon has generated a level of media attention that sometimes outpaces the scoreboard. After Miami, wearing a string of early exits brought criticism and some of the conversation around her swings between extremes, between unconditional adoration and disproportionate criticism, neither of which actually serves the athlete. Eala herself addressed this directly. After losing to Coco Gauff in Dubai 6-0, 6-2, she didn't deflect. She acknowledged openly that she still had significant ground to close against the top women in the sport. That kind of honesty is uncommon. That kind of self-awareness under that kind of pressure is rarer still. She said, "I constantly try to express gratitude. From my background, I have seen extreme poverty. I have seen severe hardship. Even if I haven't experienced such hardship personally, I can still be grateful for what I have." There is a meaningful difference between honest assessment and erasure, between identifying the gaps and dismissing the accomplishments entirely. She started 2025 ranked number 138 in the world. Why set aside the debate for a moment? Set aside the headlines and the clipped quotes and the comment sections. Because what that number represents, and what number 50 represents by December, is a story that no controversy can diminish. Tennis is changing, and it has been changing for some time. The sport was built around a relatively small group of American and European names, followed by a global audience that was already inside the culture. That world is opening up. New markets, new faces, new fans who are not passive. Fans who are organized, vocal, emotionally invested, and genuinely present in a way the sport hasn't experienced before. The Dubai referee, who had spent decades watching the world's best players, said Eala's matches created a mood unlike anything he had seen in that arena. Not necessarily louder, but different in nature. More pressing, more connected. After defeating Eala in Dubai, Coco Gauff stepped to the microphone and said, "I would like to thank Alex for bringing a new demographic to the sport. I am very grateful for it." An opponent, after winning, acknowledging the gift her defeated rival was giving the game. Jessica Pegula described Eala as the ideal role model, the way she fills stadiums, the way her country supports her, the way she carries the pressure with a poise and maturity that most veterans would struggle to maintain. When it was that same 20-year-old that Rafael Nadal chose as his first practice partner when he returned to a tennis court after a year away. Not for Fauna, not for anyone else, for her. Nadal once said he never thought about records, only the next point. That philosophy carried him to the most celebrated clay court career the sport has ever seen. And when he picked up a racket again, after 365 days, the next point he chose to make was this one. This is not a story about blame. It is not Fauna versus Eala, and it is not Federer versus Nadal. It is a sport at a turning point, being asked to choose between embracing what it is becoming and holding on to what it used to be. Alex Eala did not manufacture her fan base. She earned it, one match at a time, on courts she wasn't supposed to reach, against opponents she wasn't supposed to beat. One in the fact that two of the greatest players in the history of tennis are now publicly on opposite sides of her name says everything about how significant she has already become. Not the greatest, the most significant. And in the long history of this sport, those have never meant the same thing. We want to hear from you in the comments. Is Alex Eala now the most crucial player in tennis? Not the best, but the most important. Subscribe, ring the bell, and let the conversation begin.